Have you ever found yourself struggling to feel content or happy on some days? Or perhaps even most days? Even though nothing particularly catastrophic is happening in your life, for some reason, there's a feeling of baseline dissatisfaction there. And despite all the good things you have in your life, your brain automatically finds the next thing to be unhappy about, or the next worry to latch onto. Your mind, for some reason, just finds it so much easier to focus on the negative things that happen in your day instead of the positive. I think a lot of us struggle with reconciling how good our lives actually are in an objective sense with how it actually feels like on a day-to-day basis. A lot of that has to do with the stressors of everyday life. Things like feeling frustrated or unfulfilled at work, family and relationship issues, worrying about the future and whether you're on the right path, worrying about how you look, worrying about your finances, and these things are constantly taking our focus away from the good things in our lives. But I've always wondered, why are our emotions so automatically geared towards the negative? Why do unpleasant feelings last way longer than positive ones? How do we fix that? And can we even fix that? In search of these answers, I've read multiple books on the topic, been in and out of therapy, had many heart-to-hearts with friends, explored spirituality, and listened to one-to-many Mel Robbins podcasts. I've distilled all those key learnings and summarized it in this video for you today. All the mental models, philosophies, and nuggets of wisdom on how to achieve and maintain happiness, ranging all the way from behavioral science to Buddhism to philosophy, as well as my own wisdom from the past 26 years of life. But before we get into it, if you're new here, my name is Tika, and I post videos every Sunday on evidence-based productivity, self-improvement, health, and well-being. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing why do we feel this way, and two, how do we fix that? How do we actually become happier? I've included timestamps below if you want to skip ahead, and I've also included a list of resources that I love and found a lot of value from, so you can check those out in the description below. Firstly, why do we feel this way? Our brains were not designed to keep us happy, they were designed to keep us alive. When I was exposed to this idea for the first time, it blew my mind. The theory is that our brains evolved in this way in order to protect us. Early humans had more to gain from focusing on what might potentially harm them compared to what would be pleasant for them. For example, if your tribe mate died because a poisonous snake bit him, you'd be in anguish because of their death, and you would also be fearful of the snake. Your brain latches onto these negative feelings and thoughts because it doesn't want you to die in the same way. So it's basically telling you to remember that snake equals bad. It wasn't useful for our survival to feel happy when we smell a really nice smelling flower or if we see a really beautiful sunset. The human brain is therefore not designed to be generally happy. So in that sense, I guess our brains unfortunately default to misery. And because that's our default, happiness then becomes a choice, an active choice. And to stay a happy human, we need to make that choice over and over again, day in and day out. So how do we go about doing that? This brings me to the second part of the video, which is how can we make ourselves happier? The 90-second life cycle of an emotion. According to Harvard brain scientist Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, our bodies can only hold onto negative emotions for a mere 90 seconds. When something negative happens in the external world, for example, your partner says something unpleasant to you, chemicals will flush through your body. This is what makes emotions physically uncomfortable sometimes. From the moment that you perceive the stimuli, to when these chemical changes happen in your body, to the moment that the chemical flush dissipates and the emotion goes away, the entire process only lasts 90 seconds. Whether that's fear, anger, sadness, after those 90 seconds are up, any remaining emotional response is basically you choosing to stay in that emotional loop. So this begs the question, why can we feel upset over something our partner told us on Monday and still feel that way on Friday? The reality is, it's just us re-stimulating that circuitry over and over again. Every 90 seconds, we refresh it again and again. And without us realizing, we're actually holding on to those emotions. We are choosing unhappiness. So the key here is to firstly recognize that you're holding on to these emotions and replaying them over and over again in your body. And secondly, to look more deeply into why this is the case and to actively do something about it. The bigger point here is, if you can choose to be unhappy over and over again, then you can do the complete opposite. Rewire that circuitry to your advantage so that you loop more positive thoughts in your mind. Happiness is a skill. Just like being good at playing the piano or being good at cooking, you need to sharpen this skill in order to be good at being happy. And it's important that we think about happiness in this way because a big misconception is that happiness is just a passive thing, something that happens to us from time to time. Something good happened to me, therefore now I feel happy. But that's the wrong way to think about it, because happiness should not be the result of something that happened outside of you, something that's beyond your control, but rather something that you can control and you can create within yourself. Once you realize that you actually have power over your emotions as opposed to your emotions having power over you, then you become unstoppable. Just because your boss said something unpleasant to you doesn't mean that you need to react in a certain way. You can pause for a bit, let those 90 seconds of chemicals flush through your body, take a deep breath, and just let it go. It doesn't have to consume your day or your week unless you choose for it to. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. In Buddhism, wanting equals suffering. When Buddha presented the Four Noble Truths, he identified desire as the origin of all suffering. Buddhism tells us that people with many desires suffer greatly because they're constantly seeking for something, always yearning for self-benefit and gain. And when we can't get what we want, then we suffer greatly. Those with few desires don't really suffer like this. And to get rid of desire, we need to practice contentment. This practice will unlock spiritual riches and give us a sense of satisfaction and happiness with what we already have. Focus on how your life feels and not how it looks. This is a much more fulfilling and rewarding way to live your life. We often chase a life that looks a certain way to other people because we think that external validation is going to bring us more satisfaction in life. It gives us this feeling that we're headed towards the right direction. If these other people think that I'm living a good life, then surely I must be living a good life. But often the people that think this way haven't done the work to truly understand themselves, to truly understand what makes them happy and fulfilled. And so because they are lost within themselves, they try to seek that definition of happiness from others. My advice is to drop everything you think that you know about what should make you happy and really explore that for yourself. What puts you in a flow state? What makes you feel truly fulfilled? Is it reading? Is it spending time with friends and family? There's absolutely no right or wrong answer to this question, but it is our responsibility to create that definition of happiness for ourselves. Stop turning happiness into a moving goalpost. This is thinking that once you achieve that particular milestone, then you're going to be happy. It could be that promotion or raise that you've been hoping for, or that new object that you've been wanting to get, like the new iPhone, or a new relationship. It's deluding ourselves into thinking that once we achieve that thing, then we're going to be happy. Have you ever noticed that once you acquire that thing, then that happiness only really lasts like a second? After that, it sort of creates this vacuum inside of you, this void which then needs to be filled by something else. And it's basically a never-ending cycle. And this is what I mean by turning your happiness into a moving goalpost, because that goalpost is forever moving, and it's moving further and further away from you the more and more things you chase. There is this term referred to as the hedonic treadmill, and it's a metaphor for the tendency of human beings to want to pursue one pleasure after another. That's because the surge of happiness that is felt after a positive event is likely to return to a steady baseline again over time. Have as many meaningful relationships with people in your life as you can. A longitudinal Harvard study, which spanned over 80 years and multiple generations, found that the single most significant predictor of happiness and overall satisfaction in life is having good relationships. It's not money, career achievements, health, exercise, or any of those things. Positive relationships keep us happier, healthier, and allow us to live longer. It's really important to invest in the people in your life and to ensure that you have people that support you in different ways. Who in your life provides you with safety and security, learning and growth, emotional closeness and the ability to confide in them, romantic intimacy, help in a practical/physical sense, as well as fun and relaxation. These are things that we need to keep stock of. A trap that I see many people fall into, and I've personally fallen into myself multiple times in the past, is relying primarily on your significant other in order to fill all these different areas of emotional need. And that's a really unsustainable model for happiness. If that person leaves, then what are you going to do then? That's your main source of happiness, safety, intimacy, and emotional connection just gone. So the lesson here is to invest in your friendships, invest in your family, mingle with people at work or at the gym, and just generally try to build positive relationships with people across all areas of your life. Change your inner voice. The language in which your parents spoke to you in growing up as a child will be the language and voice that you adopt for your inner voice as an adult, unless you actively do something to change that. The really insidious thing is that your inner voice sounds like you talking, but it's not actually you. It's your mom's voice or your dad's voice. Usually it's the parent or caregiver that inflicted the most amount of trauma onto you. This is related to a whole area of therapy referred to as reparenting yourself, and part of that is changing your inner voice. How you speak to yourself really makes a huge difference. Your inner voice essentially keeps you company. Imagine it as another person, and this person is with you for your entire life. They say that you are the company that you keep. So if you keep negative company, then you will continue to have a negative outlook on life. Do less things out of obligation and more things out of free will, as much as possible. When you do things out of obligation, it's like the emotional equivalent of needing to carry a heavy box with you as you're doing it. For example, your acquaintance invites you over to their birthday party and you feel really obligated to go because you don't really want to hurt their feelings, and your other friends are trying to convince you to go as well because they're going, but you know that deep down you really don't want to go to this party, but you give in to this pressure and end up going anyway. Just imagine that as you're walking to this party, you're carrying this really heavy box with you at the same time, and that box is the metaphorical representation of obligation. And the weight of obligation is heavy, and it's tiring to keep carrying around with you. Now imagine that you actually did want to go to this party. That box, it's gone, and you're able to walk to your friend's house with ease. That burdensome weight is no longer with you. Once I started being brave enough to say no to the things that I didn't want to do, it made my life so much lighter and less cumbersome. It's really important to draw boundaries where they're needed and not to do things just to appease others. This is what it means to protect your inner peace. Happiness is not a one-time destination. You won't ever get to this stage of your life where you achieve happiness and that's it. Job done, I've arrived at station happiness. Happiness is a lifelong practice of gratitude and contentment, and also being aware of your negative biases. Have an attitude for gratitude. So here's an activity that I want you to do right this second, and it's a really easy, really fast activity. I want you to write down all the things that make you happy. And it could be something as simple as when I'm at the beach, or when I'm at a cafe with a friend, or when I'm eating scrambled eggs. It could literally be anything. So you can start that sentence off with I am happy when, and just continue that list. You'll notice that the act of writing this list will cause you to feel happy. You'll feel energized. You can do this weekly and keep adding stuff to this list. And this is what psychologists call an attitude for gratitude. When I did this activity, it sort of made me realize something. I noticed that I only frequently did maybe one or two things out of the several things that I put down on my list. And it really got me thinking, why? Why don't I do the rest of these things more often? These were all things that weren't so difficult to achieve either. Maybe when you're writing down your list of happy things, you might discover something that surprises you and will cause you to change your mindset or behavior around how you spend your time, and realize that maybe, like me, you should be doing more things that make you happy. A bad day does not equal a bad life. A bad week is not a bad life. A bad year is not a bad life. Your whole life is not defined by a few negative or traumatic experiences. Even though each experience might have felt like it was the most momentous, most traumatic thing that ever happened to you, it does not define the course of your entire life. It could be something like losing your job, or losing a loved one, or losing a ton of money in the stock market. Our brains tend to catastrophize the things that happen to us, especially the negative events. Your life is worth the sum of all its parts. The good, the bad, the neutral, and literally everything else in between. It's really not as simple as either having a good life or a bad life. So these are all the key learnings that I have for you today on how to achieve happiness and how to maintain that in your life. If you found these insights valuable, then please don't forget to subscribe and to like the video. It really goes a long way in supporting this channel. I post videos every Sunday on evidence-based productivity, self-improvement, health, and well-being. So if that sounds like your jam, then do check out the other videos on my channel. Take care, guys. See you in the next video.